The year was 1878. The wind over Silver Bend carried a dry, restless whisper that seemed to echo every broken dream and half-kept promise of the frontier. Dust clung to everything: the wooden boards, the horse saddles, even the hope that clung faintly to the women gathered at the station that morning. They stood lined up in faded calico dresses and trembling smiles, each one waiting for a man to call her name and change her life. Among them stood Amelia Vance, a woman of 31 years who had learned to keep her chin high even when the world turned its back. She wasn't old, not by heart, but in a land where youth was currency, she had long since been declared bankrupt. 6 times before, she had answered letters promising love, stability, and a new beginning. 6 times she had stood on similar platforms, her hands clutching a worn carpet bag, her heart pounding with a mix of hope and dread. And 6 times she'd watched those hopes scatter like dust when someone younger, prettier, or easier was chosen instead. The sting of rejection had become familiar, almost comforting in its predictability. But that morning, as the sun climbed high over the red hills, she told herself that this time would be different. If not now, there would be no next time. The town of Silver Bend was a place both cruel and kind. It was built on the backs of dreamers, outlaws, and those too stubborn to quit. Men came here to carve out their names, and women came to try and survive. The saloon's piano could be heard even in the daylight, a tired melody playing to the rhythm of hammer strikes and wagon wheels. But that day, the sound of hooves cut through it all. Slow, deliberate, powerful. The crowd turned. Silas Calloway was a man carved out of the land itself, tall, broad, and quiet, with a face hardened by sun and solitude. The most respected rancher in the valley, and the most feared when crossed. He had lost his wife 5 winters ago and buried 2 children before their first birthdays. Some said he'd forgotten how to smile. Others whispered he'd sold his heart to the land, but no one denied his strength. He was the kind of man the West respected and pitied. When he rode up to the platform that day, people fell silent. The younger women leaned forward, trying to catch his eye. But Silas's gaze didn't linger on them. It swept the line of hopeful faces, sharp and assessing, until it stopped, unexpectedly, unwaveringly, on Amelia. She lowered her eyes, unaccustomed to being truly seen. Dust danced in the air between them, golden under the afternoon sun. He dismounted slowly, removed his hat, and said in a voice low and steady, "Ma'am, I ain't looking for a girl to decorate my house. I'm looking for a woman who can build a life with me. You look like you've done your share of building." It wasn't poetry. It wasn't charm. But it was truth. And in that moment, Amelia knew this wasn't a man who made promises he wouldn't keep. She nodded, silent, and he helped her onto his horse. As they rode away, the wind carried the whispers of those left behind. Life on Calloway Ranch was not easy. The land stretched wide and wild, miles of open grass, jagged mountains on the horizon, and skies that seemed to go on forever. Mornings began before dawn and ended long after the sun had vanished. But Amelia did not shy away. She learned to mend fences, to knead bread that stayed soft through winter, to light a fire that would not die through the night. The hands that had once trembled with disappointment now worked with quiet strength. At first, Silas spoke little. Grief had turned him inward, cautious. But as days turned into weeks, something began to shift. He found comfort in her steadiness, in the way she never complained, in the sound of her voice humming softly as she worked. She, in turn, found safety in his silence, not the cold silence of judgment, but the calm of a man who did not demand more than she could give. The valley began to change because of her. Amelia started teaching the children of neighboring homesteads, turning a small barn into a makeshift schoolhouse. She tended to the sick, cooked for travelers, and earned respect in a town that had once looked through her. Silas watched, quietly proud, realizing that the woman he'd chosen had given him more than help. She had given him peace. Then came the winter of 1881, the hardest Silver Bend had seen in decades. Snow-buried fences, froze rivers, and starved cattle. Many families left, chasing survival elsewhere. But Amelia stayed. When Silas fell ill, she chopped wood with her bare hands, carried water through snowdrifts, and sat by his bedside for 3 days without sleep, whispering prayers to a God she wasn't sure was listening. And when he finally opened his eyes, weak but alive, he said the words that stayed with her forever. "You saved me, Amelia." And not just this time. Years turned into decades. They grew old together, their hair silver like the frost that painted their ranch each morning. When Silas passed, the town mourned him, but it was Amelia they honored. They called her the heart of Silver Bend. She continued to teach until her hands grew too tired to write. And when she finally laid down her head one quiet evening, the same way she had lived, without fuss, without fear, she left behind a legacy that stretched far beyond her years. Children named after her, roads built because of her efforts, and a story whispered through generations of a woman who had been overlooked by everyone until the day a man saw her not for what she wasn't, but for what she was. Amelia Vance's story is not one of fairy tales or youthful passion. It's the story of endurance, of a woman who turned rejection into strength, silence into wisdom, and loneliness into purpose. In a world that measured a woman's worth by her youth and beauty, she proved that true love, the kind that survives drought, death, and time itself, belongs to the brave, not the perfect. She was never invisible. She was unforgettable. And in the still winds of Silver Bend, some say that when the sun dips low and the sky burns gold, you can still see her silhouette on the ridge, the woman who was once forgotten but became a legend.